Welcome. Let's continue with our discussion of how to convert and calculate area in the different measurement systems, the US system and the metric system. So to begin with, we have some conversion factors, and do keep in mind, any of these collection of conversion factors in this chapter will be included as given information in our exam. So I will include that as part of it. All you as a student need to know is how to work with these conversion factors. So let's fill in this chart. In converting between different ways to measure area, we know we can measure length in inches and feet, and area is length times length, so it will have units of something squared. So 144 square inches of area is equal to 1 square foot. So whenever we think of these units of square inches, square foot, we think of this as a two-dimensional space. This is covering 2 dimensions. 9 square feet is equal to 1 square yard. 43,560 square feet is equal to 1 acre of land. And then 640 acres is 1 square mile. Now, before we get to our next example, one key idea that we'll want to keep in mind is if we hear the phrase population density, you would find population density by taking the overall population in a certain area and dividing it by the amount of land, the area of land that you're looking at. So in our first example, we have the population of California at this time period was 39,144,818, and its area was or is 163,695 square miles. Now, based on this, what's the overall population density for California? And we do need to round our answer to the nearest tenth. So we'll use our formula. Population density is population divided by area containing that population. So we'll write it out. Our 39,144,818 people divided by the amount of space where those people live, 163,695. And just looking at the units, think about what is this number representing? It's representing the population, so this is number of people. What is this number representing? It's the area in square miles, so its units are square miles. So whatever our answer is when we round to the nearest tenth, the units of it will be people divided by, which is the word per, square miles. So we might write that out just to make sure we don't forget. People per, that's our division, square miles. So now calculating this, we'll carefully type it into the calculator. Divided by 163,695. And we get 239 point, and now we have to decide to round to the tenth. That's the first decimal place. So you look one past, and if this number is less than 5, you stay the same, which it is, so you're going to stay at 239.1. Had it been 5 or greater, then the 1 would have turned into a 2. We would have rounded up. But as it's a 3, less than 5, we stay where we're at. So we say rounded to about 239.1 people per square miles. Next, we have that the National Park Service administers approximately 84 million acres of national parks. So this is a measurement in acres. And we're asked how large would this be measured in a different unit in square miles. So let's go back to the top of this page. And we see the relevant conversion factor, 640 acres is equal to 1 square mile. So we'll write that down within our example. Going back to this is how we convert between acres and square miles. Now, as we're just thinking through this, perhaps you know a faster way to solve it. You would just know that in this case, there are more acres in a square mile. So to go from acres to square miles, you would just divide the 884 million by 640. If that makes sense to you, go ahead and do it. That is exactly a great way to solve this problem. If that's not as intuitive to you, though, there is a method that will always work. It's what we illustrated in our previous section. It's this idea of always starting with what measurement you began with. So we began with 84 million acres. So I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to note what unit I'm in. Acres. And then we draw our line. This helps us keep track of whether we should multiply or divide. And then the idea is we want to cancel out the acres. So I look at my conversion factor that relates acres and square miles, and I focus on the portion that is the acres. That goes below because I want to cancel the acres. So 640 acres. I want to make sure that I'm not actually changing the value. So we know in order to not change the value, you have to multiply by 1, right? So in order for to be equal to 1, I need to put what that is equivalent to at the top. 640 acres is equivalent to 1 square mile. And as these are equal, something divided by itself is 1. Multiplying by 1 doesn't change the value. And the way we would solve this problem is in this process, you always multiply the top numbers and then divide by the bottom number. And that will make sure you end up converting things correctly. So 884 million multiplied by 1 is still 84 million. We divide that by 640. And we would get 131,250 square miles as our answer. So keep in mind, if converting between different measurements just intuitively makes sense to you, feel free to do that. If you're unsure how to intuitively do it, this method of the chart will always work. So it's just up to your preference of how you want to go forward with these problems. Next up, let's look at some conversion factors between ways that we measure area in the US system of measurement and ways that we would measure it in the metric system. So as before, all this information on the chart will be provided in this chapter's exam. All students need to do is know how to work with it if they're given this information. So we'll fill in the chart. 1 square inch is equal to 6.5 square centimeters. 1 square foot is equal to 0.09 square meters. 1 square yard is equal to 0.8 square meters. 1 square mile is 2.6 square kilometers. And 1 acre is equal to 0.4 hectare. So with these conversions, let's do a few different examples. It says a property in Italy is advertised for $545,000 for 6.8 hectares. Find the area of the property in acres. So we want to convert this number given in hectares to acres. So in order to convert between these two, we look back at our list and we ask ourselves which of these would help us convert between hectares and acres. Mentally focus on which of these is the useful conversion factor. This is our relevant quantity. 1 acre is 0.4 hectares. Now the intuitive way to think about this problem is as 1 acre is equal to 0.4 hectares, the hectare is a larger measurement. So if you're converting something that measures a larger amount at once into something and you're measuring the same size but by a smaller measurement, in this case acres, you know you're going to need more of the thing that's a smaller measurement in order to measure the same value. So with that reasoning, we could realize, oh, I just need to take the 6.8 and multiply by, excuse me, I need to make a small correction. I was about to say multiply by the 0.4, but the problem with that is multiplying by a number less than 1 actually makes the value smaller, which is against what we are trying to figure out. We intuitively know if you have 6.8 hectares, you would have more acres. However, multiplying by our conversion factor would give us a smaller number. That's why the intuitive sense would tell us we should divide by the 0.4. So if you're used to just converting based on intuition, that's how you would go about this problem. Let's show how we might do this in the structured chart approach as well, if you prefer. So in the chart method, we always write down the initial measurement we're given. So we're given things in hectares. We want to get to acres. We've already identified the conversion factors. So we know we want the hectares to cancel. So I put the 0.4 hectares below so that my hectares will cancel. It has to be equivalent to what it is in acres. So I write that above. So this is really multiplying by 1. We know that top numbers multiply. Multiplication by 1 doesn't change anything. Bottom numbers divide. So this will give us 6.8 times 1 is 6.8 divided by 0.4. And that will give us 17 acres is the equivalent size of land in acres. Now here our follow-up question is saying what's the price per acres? Well, we know the price and we know the amount of land given in acres. So price per acres, remember the word per makes us think of division in mathematics. So we would take the overall price listed and divide that by how many acres we have. That gives us the dollars per acre. And we would get $32,058, and dollars have 2 decimal places for cents, so let's say about 82. We'll show that we rounded with the squiggly equals. $82 per acre is the price per acre. So next up, we're going to talk about how we could measure volume in different units and convert between those different units measuring volume. So as always, the information in this chart will be provided by the instructor on the exams. All students have to do is know how to work with this information if given. So let's fill in our chart. We have that 2 pints is equal to 1 quart. 4 quarts are equal to 1 gallon. 200 gallons is equal to 1 cubic yard, and the units for that might look like yard cubed. 7.48 gallons is equal to 1 cubic foot, looks like foot cubed. 231 cubic inches is 1 gallon. 128 fluid ounces is 1 gallon, and 8 fluid ounces is 1 cup. With these conversion factors in mind, let's look at some of our examples that has us convert between different measurements of volume. So this says, suppose a pool has a volume of 10,000 cubic feet. How many gallons of water does this pool hold? So we want to find a conversion factor that will relate cubic feet and gallons. So let's look back at our list. From this list, can you identify the conversion factor that relates cubic feet to gallons? That would be this conversion factor. So at this example, right below, I should write down that 7.48 gallons is equivalent to 1 cubic foot. So we have our helpful conversion factor. And if we prefer the chart method, we know we always start with the value that we're given in its units. So 10,000 cubic feet. And we want to convert that into gallons. So we write, since we want to get rid of the cubic feet, we write the cubic feet value below. 1 cubic feet is equivalent to 7.48 gallons. And the way our chart works is we know what's above and below cancel, so the cubic feet cancels. Numbers at the top multiply. Numbers at the bottom divide. So this will tell us to take our 10,000, multiply it by our 7.48, divide everything by 1. Now dividing by 1 is not changing the value, so we can essentially just take the 10,000, multiply it by 7.48. And we would get 74,800 gallons is the equivalent measurement to 10,000 cubic feet. Now, we've worked with the metric system before. We know the prefixes in the metric system have a particular meaning, So let's apply that now to measurements of volume. So the basic measurement of volume in the metric system is liters, symbolized by a capital L. And then as you want to show multiples of those liters, we would go up the list. So a deciliter we know a deca means 10 of, so 1 deciliter is 10 liters. Next, we have our hectoliter. And we know hecta is the idea of 100, so 1 hectoliter is equal to 100 liters. Next, we have our kiloliter. And we know kilo is the idea of 1,000, so 1 kiloliter is equal to 1,000 liters. And below in the bottom of this chart, we have the fractions of a liter. So not a whole liter, but a portion. So first up is our deciliter, indicated by the abbreviation DL. And deci is the idea of 1/10. So we have that 1 deciliter equals 0.1 liters. That is 1/10 of a liter. Centiliters, abbreviated by CL, represent 1/100th of a liter. So 1 centiliter is 0.01 liters. And finally, we have our milliliters, abbreviated by ML. And 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. So this would be our conversion factors that relate the different volume measurements in the metric system. We also have a few conversion factors between measuring volume in the US system and the metric system. 1 teaspoon is 5 milliliters. 1 tablespoon is 15 milliliters. 1 fluid ounce is 30 milliliters. 1 cup is 0.24 of a liter. 1 pint is 0.47 of a liter. 1 quart is 0.95 liters. 1 gallon is 3.8 liters. And 1 cubic centimeter, so see the centimeter cubed, is equal to 1 milliliter. And both of these charts, as always, will be provided on the exam. Students just need to know how to work with the information given. So in our first example, we have that a fish pond has a volume of 220,000 cubic centimeters. How many liters of water does the pond hold? Now let's first look at our chart and ask ourselves, do any of these conversion factors tell us how to go from cubic centimeters directly into liters? And the answer would be no. Now, do any of these work with cubic centimeters, what we began with? And for that, I would say yes. This one relates cubic centimeters. Now, it doesn't relate it to liters. Instead, it relates it to milliliters. So our reasoning here is we're going to go from cubic centimeters to milliliters because that's the only conversion factor that we have. And then milliliters to liters, we know how to work with the metric system. We could take a measurement in milliliters and then convert that to liters. So that's going to be our idea. So I'm going to write down our relevant conversion factors. To go to centimeters cubed, cubic centimeters to milliliters, we know that 1 cubic centimeter is 1 milliliter. Now to go from milliliters to liters, we can look back at our metric system chart. And we see that 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. Now with these two conversion factors, we can make our chart, which will help us go from cubic centimeters to milliliters and then finally to liters. So we always begin with the value we started with, 220,000 cubic centimeters. We first want to cancel the cubic centimeters, so we use this conversion factor, 1 cubic centimeter is equivalent to 1 milliliter. And with that, the cubic centimeters above and below cancel. Now we're in milliliters. To go from milliliters to liters, we use the next conversion factor. We want to cancel the milliliter, so 1 milliliter. Write the other value right above it is equal to 1/1000th of a liter. Next, the milliliters cancel. And then we know our way our conversion chart works is numbers at the top multiply, and numbers at the bottom are divided into those values. So this will be 220,000 times 1 times 0.001, all divided by 1 times 1. And of course, dividing by 1 doesn't change the value. So here I have 220,000 divided by 1, and we get 220 liters is the equivalent value to 220,000 cubic centimeters. Next, we're asked to convert a variety of measurements of volume. So first, 25 milliliters to liters. Now earlier we wrote down this conversion factor. We know that 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter from our above chart. So to go from 25 milliliters to liters, we set up our conversion chart correctly. These will cancel, and we know it will end up being 25 times 0.001 divided by 1. And we get 0.025 liters. Now, by whichever method you prefer to complete these examples, I would encourage you to attempt these on your own. Remember, you can look back at the top of this page in your notes for the different conversion factors between measurements of volume. And then when you're done with the work, unpause the video to check your answers. So pause the video now, attempt the next 3 on your own, and then unpause the video to check your work. Now our next example is to take hectoliters to liters. We first begin by verifying our conversion factor, so let's look back at the chart. Our chart tells us that 1 hectoliter is 100 liters, so we write that down. So to go from 15,000 hectoliters, each hectoliter is 100 liters, so we know in the end there should be more measurements of liters. 1 hectoliter is equal to 100 liters. And then we know that we'll end up multiplying these two values. And in the end, we would get 1,500,000 liters as the equivalent value. Now our next example goes between cubic centimeters and milliliters. Let's look back at our chart. The important conversion factor here is 1 cubic centimeter is exactly 1 milliliter. So the exact same measurement in cubic centimeters is the same in milliliters. So as these are the same 1-to-1, we automatically know there's 25,000 milliliters because there's the exact same many milliliters as there are cubic centimeters. And if you wanted to verify this, if you do the chart method, you'd get to the exact same answer. Now, to go from cubic centimeters to liters, we know there's not a conversion factor that goes directly from cubic centimeters to liters. However, we do know that cubic centimeters can be converted into milliliters as we did in our last example. And then once we're at milliliters, we know we can go to liters because the conversion factors are 1 cubic centimeter from our chart is 1 milliliter. And then 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. So if we were to work through this with our conversion chart, we know 25,000 cubic centimeters. We already figured out from above that that is 25,000 milliliters, so that's our starting value. And then to go from 25,000 milliliters, convert that into liters, We know 1 milliliter is equal to 1/1000th of a liter. So this would give us 25 liters as the equivalent value. So that brings us to the end of this section's note. Remember, as always, I'm happy to help you. Just reach out to me if you have any questions.